Love it or hate it, Drive to Survive is returning to our screens on the last Friday of February, 1 week before the 2023 season begins. The show has garnered its fair share of criticism, while also helping the sport achieve new levels of popularity. From fake rivalries to editorial artistic license overload, the series is almost more fiction than fact, and that might be why this is the last one we'll ever see. Is this season of Drive to Survive going to crash harder than Max Verstappen at Silverstone? Let's find out. Netflix Formula 1 documentary, and I use the word documentary in the loosest sense, Drive to Survive received much praise and criticism. The show helped gain literally millions of new F1 fans who were fascinated by the prospect of the sport. But in 2020, one very prominent person who did not like the series spoke out: Red Bull's Max Verstappen. At the time, the two series of the show had showcased a lot of behind-the-scenes aspects and the lives of many important entities in F1. Many viewers have also been enthused by the relationships and, in some cases, even rivalries that were created. However, much like any other show, it consisted of elements of drama to engage the viewer. The dramatizing of the sport was always there, but until Verstappen spoke out 3 years ago, we weren't aware of quite how dramatized it was. In an interview at the time, Verstappen was asked what he thought of the series. He stated, "I didn't like that at all, because a lot of it is fake. I know what I talked about with my engineers. Some of the things I said in Australia or in Austria, they're used for another Grand Prix to make it more exciting. That's just sensationalism," said Red Bull's number 33. Verstappen was treated less sympathetically than his teammate in the first season of the show. The grinning, wisecracking Ricciardo is the first and last face seen in the season. The narrative followed Ricciardo's decision to leave the team and indicated his relationship with Verstappen was a contributing factor. It played up Red Bull's desire for Verstappen to become the sport's youngest world champion, while also showing team principal Christian Horner denying that in a conversation with Ricciardo's father. Verstappen and Ricciardo featured prominently in the third episode, Redemption. This covered the collision between the pair at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. "I was made to feel guilty," says Ricciardo, over a slow-motion shot of his unsmiling teammate. It is this kind of cutting of interview responses over shots that might not relate to the question asked, or responses being taken out of context, that drivers have become unappreciative of. In 2021, many drivers were still on board with the show and chose not to speak out against it. Presumably they, or their teams, are paid to be a part of it. "I'm fine with it. You can choose a lot of things which almost go in and don't go in," said Lando Norris at the Circuit of the Americas in 2021. "So I'm happy. I think it's a cool thing, especially coming to America. There's so many people which are now into Formula 1 just because of watching Drive to Survive." While Lando was on board then, the sentiment toward the show in the paddock started to shift in 2022. After the series covering the 2021 season came out, some drivers started to criticize just how far the show was going with its sketchy editing, dramatizing, and rivalry creating. The fans were starting to feel the same way as well. Those who had seen the first couple of series had probably had a chance to watch a few full races and follow the news online for a season. They knew what exactly went on, and they quickly realized that it wasn't the same as what Netflix was selling. So how far does Netflix's Hollywooding of the sport go? And why could it mean that this season will be a huge failure? Throughout the drama-filled series, we get to see some on-track action, but not a lot. This action usually involves the start, two battling drivers, or a crash. Whenever one of those scenes is shown, the sound effects leave you wondering where the noise is coming from. They include enhanced effects during crashes, where you hear something being broken with louder thumps and thuds than in reality. They amplify the engine sounds, which is more of a commentary on the actual sport than the series itself. F1 needs engines that leave people gobsmacked, not almost dozing off to sleep. The series puts a spotlight on that fact when they over-amplify the sound of the V6 hybrids. The other exaggerating sound effect is the tyre screeches. It becomes amusing when a car skidding on a gravel trap is heard screeching its tyres on occasion. That's just nitpicking really though. It is an unwritten rule of the sport that one must respect the other drivers on track, naturally for safety reasons. No one can predict what happens when you go wheel-to-wheel racing at 230 plus miles an hour. Therefore, driver rivalries tend to be respectful off-track, but respectfully aggressive on-track. The drivers are intelligent enough to separate one and the other for that reason. The show's continuous attempts to make these rivalries bigger than they are, though, is getting tiring for many fans. I already mentioned Daniel Ricciardo earlier, and his rivalry, I'm doing air quotes by the way, rivalry with Max Verstappen, but he suffered from it again in Season 2. Season 2 of the series attempted to create this tension between two charismatic drivers, Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz. The series seemed to want to create some malice within the rivalry. The same thing happened in Season 4, when Daniel was pitted against his teammate Lando Norris. Netflix made it seem like the two hated each other, but in reality, they were good mates off track. Sure, their age difference meant they didn't have a huge amount in common, something Daniel admits to, but the fact that Ricciardo doesn't join Lando and ex-McLaren driver Carlos Sainz for their weekly golf game doesn't mean they hate each other. Speaking of Lando's old teammates, Norris and Carlos Sainz were pitted against each other in the same series. Minor incidents on the track between the two drivers were escalated with not a single ounce of substantial evidence for a rivalry. Like I just said, they play golf together all the time. Carlos's dad comes along for some games as well. You don't invite your dad for a game of golf with your bitter rival. Come on, Netflix, try harder. Drive to Survive is notorious for misinterpreting moments and quotes by drivers and team principals to fit their imagined storylines. In some cases, radio messages of a driver were imposed on an episode based on an entirely different event or race. In Season 4, with renowned F1 reporter Will Buxton, Drive to Survive went as far as mincing words from different interviews to create sentences that fit their agenda. Sometimes the sentences don't even make sense, allowing Buxton, a respected personality, to become a meme on Twitter. He does actually talk 2 words at a time though. Not even the Drive to Survive producers could come up with something that insane. Some of the storytelling and dramatizing got so bad that I've read genuinely serious articles asking if Drive to Survive is staged. For you to take something real like Formula 1, with real storylines and real intrigue, and then make it seem so dramatic it wouldn't be out of place on an episode of The Real Housewives, then things have probably gone too far. So what's being done about it? Well, Max Verstappen is back in the series this season, after talks with Netflix about how they portray him, and the dramatizing of stories around him went well. Formula 1 themselves were probably a big part of that. After the release of Season 4 in early 2022, the consensus in the sport was that the series had gone too far and needed reining in. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali will be all too aware of the benefits that the Netflix series has brought to the championship. He'll be able to see all those benefits in his bank account, but equally understands why some drivers do not like the way they can be portrayed. He said in 2022 that following discussions with teams about the situation, there will be a push for Netflix to roll back on some of the fake elements so that all drivers feel comfortable taking part. There is no question that the Netflix project has had a very successful effect, Domenicali said in an interview. In order to ignite the interest of a new audience, a tone was used that in some ways focused on dramatizing the story. We will also talk to Netflix, because it's necessary that the story does not move away from reality. Otherwise, it no longer fits. It is a topic that we will address together with the drivers. We have to make sure that a project that has generated such exceptional traction has a language that continues to appeal, but without distorting the image and meaning of the sport that we live with every day. So, for Season 5, releasing this February and covering the 2022 season, we can hope that the fake side of Drive to Survive will be gone. While that might appease fans of the sport, fans of the show might find it lacking in the same drama that once drew them to it. For those who are a fan of the show, not the sport, this season could very well be a failure. But we're fans of the sport, so what about us? Whatever conversations have been had between F1 and Netflix, this show remains a huge moneymaker for both Netflix and Formula 1. Because of this, they won't want to move too far away from the tried and tested money-making format. If we had to guess, there'll still be a dozen fake stories, loads of audio clips put over other races, and plenty of stuff that just doesn't match the reality of the sport. If this is the way that it goes, then Drive to Survive will fail, and Formula 1 fans will be left laughing, seeing the show that made their sport into a joke flop. Want to learn about the upcoming season of Formula 1? I mean, the real Formula 1? Then click the link on your screen and I'll see you there.